policy of Japanese nuclear power plant and the policy of the going to the militarism in Japan. Also, policy of the U.S. government for the militarism and for the nuclear weapons. We have to stand here again and again because the government is lying us. Government is saying that the Fukushima disaster is contained, is under control, and there is no health risk in Fukushima in Japan. So that the Japan invited 2020 Tokyo Olympic. Abe Prime Minister lied that Japan is safe, under control, and they even shamefully the international IOC granted Tokyo Olympic. It's very ridiculous and absurd. Now, Abe governing party wanted to put the lid on the all shame of Fukushima, all the truth of the Fukushima, and then let people's eye to the cheerful Tokyo Olympic. They spending a lot of money to the Tokyo Olympic, but less money for compensate the Fukushima victims. Yes, the victims of the Fukushima melted down. Those people are still suffering. It's been almost 7.5 years, but they are still having a hard daily lives, rarely compensated fully. And then children are still abandoned to the area. It's not safe. Japan lifted up the safety limitation of the taking the radiation 20 times higher. Those levels are very special area that people cannot even eat. People cannot even go toilet there. When people live there, they have to, everything live there cannot bring to the other area.
It's the first time I see this.
This is Fukushima's called nuclear emergency. Soon after the meltdown, Japan put Japan under the nuclear emergency, and after 7.5 years, still we are under the nuclear emergency. How many people know those facts? American people, of course, know. I mean, they're very surprised that we are doing here. What happened in Fukushima? Isn't it over? No. Fukushima's disaster is not over. Because Japanese government is lying and hiding the truth. Last our rally for the October 11th in a group called Go West and Come West, which circle is telling the people the truth of Fukushima and Fukushima's today's condition. They sent a message here, so maybe some people remember, but they have very wide connection on circle. For example, like civil monitoring group, or like let's see, search of the inner body eradication or health problem under the radiation. And then one of the members sent to us the fact of the Minami Soma public hospital. Their summary of the before the meltdown and every year after meltdown, how the patient changed. And I was so stunned that increasing those patients in the Minami Soma city. It is really amazingly increasing. So I must let you know that just a second. I have to find something so Steve will do.
So we're here today on the 11th of this month. We are here every 11th to protest the government's effort to tell the people of Fukushima, the children and families, they have to return to Fukushima. We're also here against the claims of the government they've been decontaminated Fukushima. The idea that there are melted nuclear rods in Fukushima inside the nuclear plants where they had the accidents and that they've been decontaminated is a lie. The Abe government is not telling the truth, they're lying to people. But this is not new because they're denialists. Their denialism about the accident. They say it's an accident. No, this company, TEPCO, was involved in covering up, getting rid of whistleblowers, including Kei Subiako, who was a whistleblower, who was an inspector from General Electric, who went to the Fukushima plant and saw that they had improper equipment in that plant. And he videotaped it, and TEPCO ordered him to edit out the videotape so that people would not see that there was a health and safety damage. And then when he went public, he was fired, and also the governor of Fukushima, that area, was fired for exposing the health and safety problems. So we're talking about systemic health and safety problems. There was just a tremendous earthquakes in Japan, earthquakes in Korea. The Korean people are also against nuclear plants. In fact, the latest evidence of what's going on is that the government now says that they want to release 900,000 tons of radioactive water filled with tritium. Now, how would you release tritium, radioactive water, into the Pacific Ocean? This is completely irresponsible. It's really criminal that you would release tritium water into the Pacific Ocean. So this affects the entire Pacific Rim, not just Japan, but Korea, the United States, and all the other countries in the Pacific Rim. But apparently, the Abe government really doesn't care whether or not radioactive water is released into the ocean. And this, again, is being increased by the restarting of these nuclear plants. Now, they've said that the nuclear plants are safe. Some of these plants are 40 years old. Now, when you're a nuclear power plant that you operate for 40 years, you become in very bad shape. The pipes get brittle, and the condition of the plant is deteriorated. But basically, the companies, the profiteers, the militarists in Japan want to continue to keep these plants operating, regardless of the dangers, the health and safety dangers, and the dangers of radiation. The other thing that we have to speak out against is the increasing repression in Japan. As we said at our last month's rally and speak out in Hiroshima, some activists, Fukushima residents, were speaking out against the danger of radiation. And the police fabricated an incident with a right-winger probably, and they arrested a woman refugee, and they put her in jail for 10 days without any charges. So I think that the government of Japan is making a statement that free speech is not allowed. People cannot talk about what's happening. If you do, we're going to put you in jail. And this is really an example of the corruption, example of the criminality of a government that would have put a woman refugee from Fukushima in jail for speaking out about the dangers of radiation. They want people to be quiet. They want people to be silent about the dangers of radiation and the dangers of restarting the nuclear plants. And additionally, the government is involved in denialism. They're denying that there were comfort women sexual slaves by the Japanese military. They want to revitalize military in Japan, and they're selling more and more military. They're buying more and more military equipment from the United States. Trump and Abe would like to be good friends with Trump, but Trump's visit with Abe is all about selling more military weapons, more jets, more bombs, more military weapons. And this is at a time, both in the United States and in Japan, where they're cutting back on social services, where they're homeless, where there's stories in Japan of retirees having to steal food in order to survive. Imagine that in a rich country, the seniors have to steal food in order to feed themselves. What kind of country is this? What kind of world is this when you have all the wealth? They have spent billions of dollars on the Olympics, and they're over budget on the Olympics. And they told Prime Minister Abe told the people of the world that it was decontaminated, it was safe. This is not true. So they're lying to the people about the danger of these radioactive nuclear plants. There is no safe nuclear plants. Nuclear plants produce radioactive waste, and there's no place to put the radioactive waste. Nobody wants the radioactive waste. What community would want radioactive waste? In the United States, they want to put the waste in the Yukon, in New Mexico. They want to put it in Nevada. People in Nevada don't want the waste. So people around the world do not want nuclear waste, yet the governments who are run by the profiteers and militarists want to continue to produce these nuclear waste. Now, the other thing about Japan, like California, is it has tremendous hot weather. In fact, during the summer, it's extremely hot. They could have solar power in Fukushima, in Japan. They don't need the nuclear plants, but there's no mass use of solar power in Japan. There's no effort. Now, in California, they did pass a law saying that new housing units have to have solar panels, and this is a good thing. But the fact of the matter is, one of the things about private control of the energy industry is they make more money by selling more electricity. It's like the oil industry. They make more money by selling more oil. It's even though we have a tremendous environmental crisis. We just had a disastrous hurricane, tornado in Florida, in Mexico City, Florida, that wiped out the town, destroyed the town. And it's one of the largest disasters, hurricanes in history. It's the fourth largest hurricane. Now, all of a sudden, there are all these hurricanes. The same in Japan. There are all these typhoons. And don't you think that that has something to do with global warming? Don't you think that that has something to do with the environment that we're in? But the denialists say, no, this is Trump. These are the oil companies. It's not true, they say. Things are getting better. It's not environment that's causing this. It's just an accident. We're saying, no, the environmental dangers to the earth, the dangers of more and more earthquakes and typhoons are a direct result of global warming, a direct result of the environment that we live in and what man is doing to put the environment in danger. And so we're here today again in front of the Japanese consulate to say that we are not going to be silent. We're not going to allow the Japanese government, the Abe government, to repress democratic rights, to silence the people of Japan who are speaking out against nuclear plants, who are speaking out against radioactivity. And the latest that I read today is that there's a lawsuit from Sendai, from residents of Sendai, who don't want the radioactive waste burned. This is another great plan of Abe. Spread the pain. So instead of spread the pain, instead of just taking care of the waste in Fukushima, spread it out through all Japan. in all the prefectures so they can all spread the nuclear waste around. What madness that this government, this Abe government, would say that they're going to solve the danger of the nuclear waste by spreading it out throughout every prefecture in Japan. This is, again, dangerous, it's criminal, and it shows what madmen these people are. Even the former prime ministers of Japan, Kano and Koizumi, are against nuclear power plants. Why? Why are they against nuclear power plants, the former prime ministers? Because they know if they have another nuclear accident in Japan, it could lead to the complete destruction of the whole country. Japan is an island. How many nuclear accidents can they afford in Fukushima? How many? It's a small island. Where do you go? I mean, the United States, at least you can try to run someplace, but in Japan, you're stuck on an island. And yet, this is what the government is doing. They're disregarding the health and safety of the people of Japan. They're disregarding the health and safety of people in the Pacific Rim when they say they're going to dump 900,000 tons of radioactive water with tritium. These kind of actions by the Abe government have to be protested. We have to speak out, and we have to let people know that this is a threat to humanity, it's a threat to the people of Fukushima, and it's a threat to the people of the world. So that's why we're here today, and we're going to be having some other speakers because we're also going to be speaking out here today of a prisoner, longtime political prisoner, Fumiaki Hoshino, who's been in jail for 42 years. And he was protesting against the U.S.-Japan military treaty. What was the U.S.-Japan military treaty? Well, supposedly we're going to protect Japan by having military bases in Okinawa and throughout Japan. What are those military bases have done in Japan? Well, in the first place, during the Korean War, they were used to bomb the Korean people. In the Vietnam War, they were used to bomb the Vietnamese people. And now these bases are leading to deaths of people in Japan. Helicopters are crashing and harming children. There's schools next to these U.S. military bases. So that's why the people in Okinawa elected a new governor who's against military bases, because they don't want to have these military bases in Okinawa, and we support them. And Fumiaki Hoshino is one of the people who opposed the U.S.-Japan military treaty, which allowed for U.S. military bases in Okinawa. They also said they would not bring nuclear weapons to Japan, but in fact, the base at Okinawa military base actually had nuclear weapons. They were brought into the military base. And now they want to build another base in Okinawa, which the people are opposed to, and that's why they spoke out against it. That's why they voted in a new governor. But apparently the Abe government really doesn't care what the people think. They're kind of like Trump. They'll do whatever they want. Trump says that he's going to do things regardless of what the people want. The people want health care, and Trump is against health care for all. He's for the people want to have a safe country without nuclear plants. Trump is for nuclear plants in the United States. He's for continuing the nuclear industry. So Trump is really threatening the health and safety, like Abe, of the people of the United States. So we're going to have some other speakers now, but stop nuclear, shut the nuclear plants now. 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 Okay, Shizu.
Hi again. Sorry, my sudden interruption because I couldn't find this paper. Okay, this is the one I got from Go West, Come West member about the cancer patient in Minamisoma City. Right now it's about 55,000 people in the population, before and after meltdown. So this is really amazing. This is a cancer disease that, so 2010 to compare to 2017, which is 6 years later of the accident, it is for the adult thyroid cancer increased 29 times, and leukemia increased almost 11 times. Everything is increasing. The lung cancer 4.2 times, child cancer 4 times, pneumonia 4 times, heart attack 4 times, liver cancer 4 times, colon cancer 3 times, and then stomach cancer 2.2 times. And then another interesting and outrageous fact is disease because for the stress of the relocation. People have to stay in temporary housing or new location or new job, and all the stress. Those stress caused the high blood pressure 1.8 and diabetic 1.8, all kind of abnormality, and then stroke is 3.5 times more. And then it's called, let's see, it's hard to see, atrial fibrillation. Those are like 4.5 times. Okay, then what the government is saying to us? Do not worry. No, there is no health risk in there. We really don't know these facts. And then they are, trying to put our eyes to not here, to the 2020 Olympic, cheerful things. And then, but the news is, Ikata nuclear power plant, the last December, they had a higher court injunction, but late September, this injunction was lifted. Now, Ikata nuclear power plant can restart. So maybe for the later this month they will restart. And even the very close to Tokyo or Tokai Genpatsu, Tokai nuclear power plant, also the approved for the restart. It takes much more time, but nuclear authorization approved. And those are very dark news, but let's not forget Denny Tamaki won for the Okinawa governor's election. The opposition is backup of the liberal Democratic Party. They spend so much money to put the opposition for the winning election, but Denny Tamaki beat it. Denny Tamaki won. So this is really hope. This is really hope that we can still fight. Still, our voice can be heard. That's the reason we should not give up, and we have to continue protesting. And then, is there the speak out? More speak out? Please.
So our next speaker is a activist for peace against nuclear power, and he was in Japan for the commemoration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and he's with the Peace Center in San Jose, and a longtime activist, Sharat Lim, is here to give a report on his trip to Japan. Welcome, Sharat.
Well, thank you, Steve. So I was in Japan in August. I was there for the anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and the atomic bombing of Nagasaki by the United States. These were very large events. In fact, there were multiple events in both cities. And I before a huge audience, I gave a speech where I did something which no U.S. president has been willing to do, which is to apologize for the United States bombing of Hiroshima and the U.S. bombing of Nagasaki. And the concerns of the Japanese people are of course that atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, be abolished, that Hiroshima shall never happen again, that Nagasaki shall never happen again, and so this is something that resonates throughout Japan, regardless of where people stand on other issues. And the next is, of course, the Fukushima. And Fukushima, of course, as nuclear power is not exactly the same as nuclear weapons, but nevertheless it represents a very, very severe risk to human life whenever there's some kind of an accident or a failure, as we saw in Fukushima. And so the Japanese people have, the majority have responded by saying that they do not want the reopening of the nuclear power plants, most of which were of course shut down as a preventive measure after Fukushima, and people are demanding that those nuclear power plants not be reactivated. And the shortfall in power, in a way, has been good for Japan, because Japan has been forced to make its energy systems much more efficient as a result of the shutdown of nuclear power. And so Japan today its energy efficiency has been greatly boosted by this, and people stand behind the shutdown of those nuclear power plants. They do not want them to be reopened. The third thing is that the United States presence in Asia, and particularly as a result of tensions on the Korean Peninsula, represent a risk of war. And so the Japanese people, particularly the working people in Japan, have taken a stand that they do not want to see any more militarism. They do not want to see a rise of U.S. saber rattling in the Korean Peninsula and elsewhere in East Asia. And one of the flashpoints, of course, is Okinawa, because the United States has 54,000 troops based in Japan right at this moment. Of those, half of them, namely 27,000, are in Okinawa alone, which is a tiny island. And in 1971, the people of Okinawa were protesting that at that time Okinawa was still occupied by the United States. It was under U.S. administration, and they were protesting that Okinawa be returned to Japan. And little did they know that the agreement that was signed by the Japanese government and the U.S. would hand over Okinawa to Japan, but would give a permanent lease to U.S. bases on the island. And those protests, I think Steve already mentioned that those protests throughout the country in support of the Okinawan people against the U.S. military bases resulted in the arrest of Fumiaki Hoshino, who has been in jail for almost 44 years now. He's a political prisoner. He was framed up. There's no evidence that actually connects him to the killing of a policeman in Tokyo, and it's sort of like a Mumi Abu Jamal case, where he's innocent. There's no evidence connecting him to that violence, but the Japanese government has insisted on keeping him in prison because they wanted to punish. They wanted to make a point that these kinds of protests will not be tolerated, even in a democracy. And so there is the question of repression. There's the question of U.S. bases. And I remind you that what the United States does when it establishes a base in a foreign country is it extracts an agreement from that country, in this case Japan, that U.S. troops at that military base shall be exempt. I repeat, exempt from Japanese law. So that means if they commit a rape, if they commit murder, the Japanese courts have no authority to prosecute the U.S. troops. And this has really inflamed Japanese people, because it's just another insult to injury that U.S. troops shall be above Japanese law when they're in Japan. The next thing I want to mention that the people whom I met in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were concerned about is the the rights of workers, and this is what's so unique about a lot of the peace movement in Japan, is that it has a very, very strong working class support. So there are a lot of workers, there are trade unions, the national railway workers who are behind this, who are opposed to nuclear weapons, opposed to the risk of war, and they stand and have spoken with one voice that they want to see an end to U.S. militarism in East Asia. And lastly, there is a move by the Abe government and previous governments to amend the Japanese Constitution, and that is Article 9. Article 9 is the article in the Japanese Constitution that commits Japan to be a nation of peace, that it will not engage in offensive actions. It will not acquire an offensive military capability. And so their move is under U.S. pressure, is to amend our Article 9 so that to remove that clause, to enable Japan to remilitarize, and who knows, in the future maybe even acquire nuclear weapons. And so these people, the workers of Japan, have stood up and said, we don't want the Article 9 to be amended. We want Article 9 to be retained, that Japan should retain its commitment forever to be a country of peace. And so this is what I came home from from my visit to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you.
You have another speaker?
We finally got the John today from Chicago. It's very nice to see you. Thank you very much. So she has some to speak out.
Hi, my name is Jan Budar. I'm from Chicago. I'm on the board of the Nuclear Energy Information Service, and I come to this protest every time I'm in town on the 11th of the month, and so I've been here before. Today I have something that I'm going to ask you to do, and it's happening that around Chicago and every place, including California, there is a movement to transport nuclear waste through cities and towns and through countrysides on railroads and in trucks on roads. Now, this is the House Resolution 3053, and unfortunately it has passed the House, and so we're appealing to senators now not to stop this bill. And so I have with me cards. I have one for Kamala Harris and one for Dianne Feinstein, and I'd like you to sign the cards. I put the stamps on here, so please sign the card and put on the stamp, and I will mail it, or you can mail it, and then I've got a packet of information. And I did have one thing to say about what the previous speaker mentioned, and that is that if nuclear power plants are producing this nuclear waste, the nuclear waste can extract plutonium, and that's what we do in the United States. That is, when we have nuclear waste from the power plants. We extract the plutonium, and this goes into making bombs. This has been the plan all along, and it's one of the reasons it's so difficult to kill the nuclear project. They're still pouring money into it and still not accounting for the money that is poured into it, because many people, the Department of Energy and other agencies, really can't see the idea that we should just stop creating waste. And the waste lasts for, as far as human lives are concerned, forever. 100,000 years is how long it lasts, and none of us will be here then. And and not only that, transporting this nuclear waste around the country in casks is going to contaminate everybody along the road. And say you were stuck in traffic next to one of these casks, it would be like an x-ray that you couldn't stop. So I would like you to sign the 2 cards, and I've got plenty of pens and stamps, and I'd also love for you to read the packet that I'm putting out with the cards. And is there anything anybody wants to ask me about what's going on in Illinois or Chicago or even farther east? In Chicago, we just had a nuclear plant shut down, and when I say just, it was 20 years ago. And the town that had that nuclear plant in it lost 45% of its tax base. So now, one of the things that Nuclear Energy Information Service is doing is trying to see to it that communities that are stuck with nuclear waste in their communities get compensated by the government. And people who are affected by nuclear power, which is, mostly people of color and mostly poor people, that there would be justice in how nuclear power is dispersed and how it is created. So that's really all I have to say, and I'm wondering if it's okay with you now if I give you the cards to sign. I'll be glad to mail them if you want me to, or somebody around here might be able to mail them. So,
Thank you.
are you, Seltzer?
We have another speaker. Well, one of the issues that we're addressing here is militarization, because No Nukes Action Committee understands that the militarization of Japan, militarization of the United States leads to more nuclear plants. That's where they get the plutonium for these nuclear plants. And we have with us today Ricardo Ortiz, who is a Puerto Rican activist, American, and he's here in San Francisco, and he is a disabled veteran who was in the military, and he had some experiences there about militarization, war, and he's also going to speak about Fumiaki Hoshino. Welcome.
Thank you. We're right here protesting, the Japanese imperialist government policies in terms of nuclear energy, and we demand the freedom for Mr. Hoshino, that has been in prison for his activism for over 4 years. So we demand free Mr. Hoshino and all the political prisoners in Japan and everywhere in the world. I will start, my speech by saying that the Japanese government is an accomplice of the United States imperialist government in its foreign policy. It shares the United States aggressive policies against the People's Republic of China. It supports and backs the United States in its aggressive policies against the People's Republic of Korea. The Japanese imperialist government has always supported every imperialist military action in Asia initiated by the United States, including the Vietnam War. So, and Japan is an imperialist country on its own right. It has multinational corporations exploiting workers all over the world, and it is an imperialist country in its own right. It's a competitor and an ally at the same time of the United States. So we got to be clear about that. We want to say that in Okinawa, it is practically a military occupation by the United States. And I'm from Puerto Rico, and I have a lot of experience. We were fighting for 60 years to get the United States Navy out of the island of Vieques, where they had a bombing range that and its whole naval establishment in Puerto Rico amounted to be the largest naval presence, largest U.S. naval presence in the Atlantic. Such it was the presence that all that naval contingents and bases were in Puerto Rico were larger and bigger than the headquarters of the United States Atlantic Fleet base in Norfolk, Virginia. So that was to the point that the Navy and other U.S. Armed Forces had its regime of occupation in Puerto Rico. But there are things that could happen and do happen everywhere in the world every day. There is activism, and through activism, through workers' mobilizations and people's mobilizations, we were able to kick the Navy out of Vieques. So we wish that the people of Okinawa could kick the U.S. imperialist bases in Okinawa once and forever. That occupation of that island has brought so many dangers, racism by United States troops. Actually, there is even one aircraft called the Osprey OB-22, which has suffered so many accidents that is ridiculous. That plane the project to build that plane was shelved in the 80s, and they did resurrect it in the late 90s and 2000s. And look what has happened. Not only is a danger to the people in Okinawa, it is also dangerous for the American GIs that have been flown on it. So that's the insanity of the whole occupation. That includes even danger for the own occupying military troops. We want, and I can tell about, occupation and actions by military personnel. One previous speaker spoke about the immunity of American troops in foreign countries. Fine, but I can tell you one thing: when the bombing of Vieques that killed David Sanes in 1997, no American airman was prosecuted for that. And actually never ever any military personnel did get prosecuted for any criminal action in Puerto Rico against the people. Actually, the judgment came from us. We judged them and we mobilized, and they were gone, because the imperialist armed forces will never ever, and they don't allow other foreign governments to touch their troops. They try at best to shield them from prosecution because it's an embarrassment to them. We have to rely on the power of the people. And that I said, I have seen it personally because I was an American soldier. I spent 4 years in the military. I was actually my military occupational specialty was in the Signal Corps. And I was at one point assigned to a lance missile battalion in Germany. So I seen these things. I seen how the U.S. Army, backed by the German police, did repress German citizens protesting against the military bases over there in Germany, in an European country. So the U.S. is a criminal power, and the Japanese are their accomplices, and they themselves I'm talking about the Japanese government, of course, not the people. The Japanese government is an imperialist government itself. So the only way we can get rid of the dangers to the environment and the global warming that these insane capitalist politicians deny. This country is being run right now by an insane and deranged billionaire that denies that global warming is a reality. The only way we can change things around is through the construction of a workers' party. We need a socialist revolution of in this country and in Japan and everywhere in the world. It is that or these capitalists will destroy us. So in order to survive, we got to get rid of them. So free Mr. Hoshimo, U.S. out of Okinawa, and long live the people and the working class of Japan and everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, from Japan, Osaka, Go West, Come West member sent us message. So Kazumi-san will read it. Thank you.
Okay, we received a letter from Mr. Etsuji Watanabe. Here it goes. Sorry. Dear friends in San Francisco, I would like to send all of you who are protesting at the Japanese consulate in San Francisco today my full-hearted greetings of solidarity from Osaka, Japan. We are all against the Japanese government's plan to dump the tritiated water stored at the defunct Fukushima plant. This plan includes Hiroshima atomic bombs comparable scale of radioactivities such as strontium-90 or like that. We are also warning the dangers in Tokyo 2020 Olympics that is sure to be, quote, radiation playing field, end quote. Let's fight back together, hand in hand. The Japanese people fighting on against the international nuclear complex of imperialism are always with you. Yours sincerely, Etsuji Watanabe, one of the volunteers for the Go West, Come West, the organization of nuclear evacuees from the Kanto and the Tohoku areas, and their supporters in Japan. This is a letter we received.
ありがとう、かずみさん。Also, as you know, that we write to Prime Minister every time for the rally. And then now we are waiting to the Japanese consulate, to the through consulate. They promised to send it to Tokyo. So this time, Tsukuru Misako Roritzen, she wrote the letter. She started to write this letter from the August, those Hiroshima Nagasaki commemoration. And then now she has like about 60 people endorsement of her letter. So her letter, Toshiko-san will read.
I'm going to read the letter to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe by Tsukuru Misako Loritze. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, as the Japanese government pours trillions of yen into preparation for the 2020 Olympics, we are concerned that very little progress is being made to ensure the security of the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and that very little attention is given to protect the health and dignity of Fukushima residents and evacuees. Recently, three news as they relate to the ongoing Fukushima Daiichi nuclear crisis caught the attention of the international community. First, termination of free temporary housing for evacuees from difficult to return areas scheduled for March 2020. Second, proposed release of tritium-tainted water currently stored at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. Third, deliberate disregard for health and safety of workers hired to decontaminate the damaged plant, many of them migrant workers, foreign trainees, asylum seekers, and people who are homeless. These reports shocked and angered many of us who are concerned about human rights of citizens of every nation and the health of this planet. The government's job is to make sure that every citizen has an access, means, and resources to live a safe, secure, and abundant life. It is the government's responsibility to respect and protect the rights of all foreigners who reside in Japan, regardless of their nationality or status. Apparently, the Japanese government is failing to fulfill its responsibilities. Other news from Fukushima deeply concern us as well. There has been more than 200 reported cases of thyroid cancer among Fukushima children. However, prominent figures in medical profession in Japan still deny the core relation between the nuclear accident and a higher rate of cancers in and around Fukushima. The Fukushima prefectural government is pushing to do away with thyroid cancer screening currently offered in schools and radiation monitoring stations in public areas. Japan's environmental ministry has approved the plan to reuse Fukushima's radiated soil in agricultural land all over Japan. What are the Japanese government's intention behind all of this? It seems as if you believe you can make things disappear by concealing, denying, or falsifying facts. But erasing 30,000 plus evacuees from statistics by declaring unsafe areas safe, eliminating their housing subsidies, and forcing them to return to their home still contaminated with dangerous levels of radiation neither makes contamination disappear or ends people's suffering. I know an elderly gentleman who is being sued for refusing to vacate his subsidized housing. A mother who fell ill due to a high stress of having to deal with the subsidies being cut. She took her own life because she could no longer work and support herself and her college-age daughter. She figured her daughter would be better off without her. Meanwhile, 6 nuclear reactors are in operation in Japan, including the one within 30 miles of my hometown, where my aging mother lives. The area is known for numerous islands and bountiful ocean life. All of that would be destroyed if anything should happen. Whatever happened to the old Japanese way of life, respecting and coexisting with nature? Have we become a heartless nation who abandons our own and turns our back on the weakest, poorest, most disadvantaged among us? On August 8, 2018, as we gathered in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles, California, to remember the nuclear atrocities committed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 73 years ago, concerned citizens with concerned citizens with and without ties to Japan and 15 peace, human, and environmental rights advocacy groups and organizations in California all signed onto this letter together to call on the government of Japan to take immediate actions to protect and restore the dignities of all who have been victimized by the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident and its aftermath. Our demands are as follows. We have 7 demands. First, reduce the acceptable annual exposure level in Fukushima impacted area to a maximum of 1 millisievert per year, which would reflect the international standard. Second, provide funding for relocation, housing, employment, education, and other essential support needed by those who chose to evacuate, stay, or return to any area where radiation exceeds 1 millisievert per year. Third, conduct annual comprehensive health checkups for residents and former residents of areas most affected by the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. Provide free access to the highest level of physical and mental health care services. Fourth, continue providing radiation monitoring stations, so-called monitoring posts, in public places so accurate reading of radiation levels in the affected areas are visible and readily available to the public. Fifth, ensure safe and secure storage of the radioactive soil. Establish temporary storage facilities away from residential areas and farmlands. Prohibit the use of contaminated soil in public works projects and farms. 6. Ensure the health and safety of workers who work in any Fukushima Daiichi related facilities and decontamination projects, including subcontractors and foreign workers. Legally require employers to provide full disclosure of possible risks of working in these facilities and project prior to the start of an employment. Make it a legal obligation of employers to guarantee an access to routine medical examination to all workers, regardless of their employment status. 7th, and this is the last one, ensure a responsible management of radioactive water in the Fukushima Daiichi facilities to prevent it from further polluting land and ocean in the surrounding area. Sincerely, Tsukuru Misako Rorinten, Fukushima Support Committee, Los Angeles, California, and about 60 more people.
ありがとう、としこさん。ありがとう、つくるさん。So no one speak out. Thank you very much for joining again. And we are here. It will be November 11th, 3 p.m. here. It's too bad that we cannot quit. We still have to our voice out and standing out to show our desire and willingness. We fight against those policy of the government. Thank you. Shut down all the nukes!
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 Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Hiroshima never again!
Hiroshima never again!
Hiroshima never again!
Hiroshima never again!
Nagasaki never again!
Nagasaki never again!
Nagasaki never again!
Nagasaki never again!
Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Fukushima never again!
Shut down all the nukes!
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 Shut down all the nukes!